It was really cool to be here at Boise Startup Week. I participated last year just by bringing a giant puppet to the dance party at the end of the event. And this year they said, hey, that was cool enough that we want you to come back and give a little talk. So my talk is called Going Big with the Colossal Collective, or 7 Things I Learned from the last 7 years of building giant puppets with my friends and taking them to concerts and music festivals. Some of this you're going to have heard before, but what I hope to do is kind of recycle and explain how some of this advice I've applied to what I'm doing. It's the kind of thing that you hear a lot of the same messages over and over again about how to do stuff or how to succeed, whatever. I think that it can be helpful to see how I've applied some what are basically commonly known things. So let's start with this question. What's the most influential or impactful art form that you've ever seen, right? What's the most influential or impactful art form you've ever seen? I want to take you on a little bit of an art histories tour. This is David. He was a French painter who, during the pre-French Revolution, this is how people got their mass media. It was a giant salon, okay? It was, most of the population was illiterate, and so this was like the movie theater and all the best books and all of the media combined into one location. People used to come in and see paintings that told them stories and made them sort of understand concepts that they hadn't seen before. This is a David painting that was basically meant to inspire the people of France to stick with the king and the monarchy and to support, the things the way that they were. He painted this, people absorbed it, and it was monumentally influential in maintaining the monarchy before the French Revolution. Here is another painting he did after the French Revolution of Napoleon, and it meant to inspire people to look at this leader, follow him. The point here is that you should all become photorealistic oil painters, right? No, that was the best way to communicate with people at the time. And so this is sort of the first thing that I want to point out. Context matters and your timing matters. So you have to communicate with people in a form that is appropriate for the time. Oil painting right now, it's tough. You don't really get it in front of that many eyes. When I said, what's the most influential art form you've ever seen? That was a trick question. It's whatever you've seen. It's subjective. It's whatever has penetrated the crazy mass of media and madness that has made an influence on your life. So recognizing what your surrounding environment is and how to communicate in that context is really important. With that in mind, I'm going to go through sort of some history of the Colossal Collective. This was the first puppet I built. This was like a giant squid puppet. It was made largely of garbage. The eyeballs were made of tins from the top of Danishes at Albertsons. The head was like a bunch of fencing I found on the side of the road. I ordered a couple yards of this green fabric and found that it glowed great off a black light, and I made this squid puppet. I took it to an event. This thing, I used no help, no funding. It was ultra cheap. This was just basically a thing that I made purely out of the passion of doing it. I said, I want to build this puppet. And I think that puppets can sort of communicate with people in a way that they're not used to as an art form. So this brings me to sort of my second big thing, which is that puppets are awesome, okay? But that's my way of saying it's important to focus on the why. Why are you making what you're making? Why is it important what you're doing? If you're not grounded with that, then you're not going to really be motivated enough to do your best. For me, I feel like people are really disconnected from some of the sort of primal instincts that we grew up with. And I think that an encounter with a larger-than-life puppet, especially an unexpected one, can lead to almost universally positive outcomes in people. People are sort of changed in a tiny but almost universally positive way. I think it really, and some people are really hit with it. They go, wow, I'm totally blown away. I did not expect to see that. The way I see it is we spend a lot of our time like this guy up here in the desk, but we have a nervous system that's prepared to handle this guy. And when you see a giant puppet roaming down the street at you, a little bit of that is turned on, is triggered, and you have a little bit of a fight or flight response. When you're interacting with normal art, like a painting on a wall in a gallery, you get to interact with it on your terms. You get to walk up. You get to decide how close you are. You get to decide, whether you touch it or not. But when a giant puppet's rolling at you and it's gonna, it's headed towards you, it's like move or fight it or something. It really is cool. It triggers something in people. people were drawn to this squid puppet. They thought it totally was awesome. And I had a couple people approach me and say like, holy cow, whatever you do next, I want to help. Count me in. So we decided to go much bigger. We were like, all right, the squid was awesome. We want to build the largest animal ever that walked on land. So we went after the big Apatosaurus dinosaur, this kind of dinosaur that, and we dove at it like a project like we've never done before, a whole bunch more testing and prototyping, a whole bunch more project management, a whole bunch more just like effort went into the project. Our timeline got a lot longer, and I actually started working with other people to build these puppets. It also came with a whole bunch of just like, wow, it's hard running big projects. You really have to plan, and you're kind of rewarded if you do a bunch of work ahead of time. This was the first project plan that I wrote that kind of went through like, what's it going to take to actually get this thing to these events that we want to go to? Here's what I learned. Oh, yeah, so this is the outcome. This was King Dasbog. He was a 60-foot-long dinosaur, 20 feet tall, and he was awesome. He was a really big boy and really fun. But here's what I kind of learned. Efficiency is huge, and it's a real thing. We spent about, let me see if I got it on this slide. Nope. Basically, we spent about 10 times as much cash. We spent about 10 times as much effort. Was this puppet, was King Dasbog 10 times cooler than the squid? I don't think so. I think that what you effectively get is something along this graph here. You get a diminishing return, and at a certain point, throwing more money and time at a project doesn't make it better. And I want to kind of make sure that you see that the area below the graph, that's not a guarantee. That's like your range of possibility, okay? So just because you put a bunch of time and effort into it doesn't mean that you're guaranteed success for something. There's a ton of startups where you go, hey, look, they threw a mountain of cash at that idea, and a lot of people worked really hard, but that doesn't mean that it had a proportionate impact. So just because you work harder and you put more money into it doesn't mean that it's proportionate to the impact, or what I like to think is the awesomeness factor. Next, I'm just going to run through some of the other puppets we built. We built a bunch of dragonfly puppets that had battery-powered wireless communicators that would sync all the dragonflies' lights together. So we could take a cell phone with a little color chart on it, and somebody could pick a color, and the whole cluster of dragonflies would change colors together. It's kind of cool. We revisited the squids and kind of did better lights on them. We did this guy, Gertie the Galactic Arachnid. So this was a huge spider, and it wasn't, I have to correct my introducer, it wasn't actually 30 feet tall, but it did stretch 30 feet wide. This was awesome. This puppet had like 12 puppeteers. It had beautiful integrated LED lights that were our first addressable project. And there it is right there. You can kind of see the sense of the scale. So it was great, and kind of through that process, I learned like execution of your ideas really matters. Like nobody is sitting there praising the director for the movies they didn't get produced. Nobody is like praising the architect for their sketchbook instead of their finished buildings. So in that regard, I think it's better to identify what kind of projects are possible. I think it's better to have done a project and completed it than to have had it stay on the sketchboard or had it get derailed because it was too ambitious. It's a tough balance, and I think that the only thing that helps you figure it out is practice and experience. Nobody owes you a win when it comes to a project. A lot of people kind of think my project has to be so awesome right out of the gates that it's either going to be my completed vision perfectly as I see it in my head or bust. And one thing I've kind of learned a lot of is that it's important to bite off what you can chew, execute something that you can actually get done, and then try to do it again and learn from that and get better. Every year that we did the Colossal, or every year we've done a puppet, we push ourselves in different ways so that we can add to our library of skills and knowledge. We also reach out and add to our network of people who can help us and people who are interested in adding their skills and knowledge to these projects. We don't try to go straight to a crazy, mechanically cool, programmed with software and tons of electrical engineering and tons of, beautiful artistry. We don't try to go straight to that. We've gone iterative. We've gone every year a new puppet, and some years we push the mechanical side more. Some years we spend more time on the software. Another thing that we use tremendously to our benefit is kicking out the ladder. At a certain point with your projects, you get to a point where you're like, okay, I need to find a way of forcing myself to finish it. And I use a lot of tools. Social pressure helps a lot. Telling a bunch of people that you're going to finish something helps you finish something because you don't want the shame of going like, what happened to that idea? It was so cool. And going, I don't know, it just didn't happen. No, you want to finish it, especially if you tell other people. I think that it's easy to want to be secretive about your projects. And no, don't worry about that. Ideas are easy to find. Executing them is hard. So find ways to force yourself to do it. One thing I tend to do with these puppets is I do lots of research on what materials I'm going to use. And I do little tests and prototype and buy stuff. And then the next thing you know, I go, all right, I'm pushing all in on this material. I'm going to buy $1,000 worth of this fabric. We're going to make this puppet out of this fabric no matter what. And it's going to produce a bunch of downstream problems, but I trust that we can solve them. Last year was the first year we called ourselves the Colossal Collective. So we kind of transitioned from being just a group that made a different puppet every year to crafting an individual identity for us. And I think that you can say that there's a lot of benefit that comes with that. We found it much easier to approach organizations and get grants because they want to sponsor like a group that's doing things and something that's repetitive. Having a solid track record of producing puppets has helped a lot. The first puppet that I tried to fundraise for, I'm sitting there with a napkin sketch going, please, trust me, I promise I'll make this thing. But now I've got this backlog of other puppets, and it really helps me when I'm trying to approach funders, when I'm trying to approach grants or events just like this one. This was Jungo at his biggest, at his full height. He was quite a big boy. So leadership. I think that when it comes to, if you're the person that's sort of leading a project, commitment breeds commitment. It's much more effective to go, hey, this project is happening. We're going to make something. You have an opportunity to help me. But if you don't, then I can find someone else. I'd really love and value your help. But like the project is going to happen without you. It's really hard, especially when you're dealing with volunteer-based projects, to get people to like want to donate all their time immediately. You have to earn commitment. You have to build commitment. And the best way to do it isn't through just saying, we're gonna, I need all your weekends for the next 3 or 4 months. That's not gonna work. They value their time. But if they see like the project has momentum, they can start building commitment slowly. And then the next thing you know, if you transfer some ownership and maybe some accountability to people, then they start to really, it becomes their project too. And then, so yeah, they become committed to it as well. Again, nobody owes you a win when it comes to leadership. Just because you have a cool idea doesn't mean other people need to help you get it done. So again, it's a little bit of like bite off what you can chew, think through what you're committed to getting done, and then other people gravitate towards that. If you ask people for too much too early, they repel. Sharing the credit really helps, and then also releasing your attachment to the outcome. Okay, so that's something that I tend to try to do a lot with these puppets. I try to focus only on what's like mission critical. If it's a safety thing where I feel like this is going to harm somebody at an event, or I feel like if it really threatens the sort of core of what that puppet is, if it's something that threatens the real gorilla-ness or the peacockiness of the puppet, then I might step in and go, nope, I basically overrule the people that I'm working with. For the most part, though, I try to release the outcomes. I didn't know that this beautiful peacock was going to end up so bedazzled and beautiful and just so pretty. I didn't know a lot of how this the final product was going to be, and I think that helps because it allows people to make the project their own a little bit. Forming the team, Captain Planet, another reference that, wow, how many of you know Captain Planet? Let's just see. Okay. The last thing is you're dumb, go learn. The way that the point here is like you need to develop a process for learning, and you need to identify what you don't know and sort of go about figuring out what you don't know with a project and learning that aggressively. So I have a process now that we work with together. A lot of it's sketching and researching, looking at the internet, seeing what else is out there, what other giant puppets have been, going to nature and using nature as an inspiration. Building a digital model, importing it into a computer so that I can have a record of it and model and modify it as we go. Then building a physical model, because there are times when it's like so much more helpful to see exactly what this thing is going to do when you're looking at it in space, how the proportions and the mechanisms are going to interact with each other. You learn so much from each one of these steps. Prototyping. again, it's like finding a cheap way of testing out something. This puppet, we didn't intend for it to be this cool. We basically meant it to be a prototype. We had a bunch of this blue fabric. It was a prototype for the mechanism and for the light inputs into the fabric. We ended up finishing it because it was just like we did a good enough job building it. But the prototyping, we learned so much, and we built a much more effective and sort of more impressive puppet the second time around. And then testing your materials, testing your assumptions, a lot of it's just like, most of us aren't engineers. There are some of us that are, but our process for the most part involves just coming up with a hypothesis, giving a best shot at like, how can we test this cheaply and easily? And then figuring out, like oftentimes it means walking around a hardware store, picking up a material and just going wah, 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 wah. And it's how you end up crashing your way towards a successful project. Just a little bit of that process illustrated for the peacock, and then I'm out of time, is basically, looking at nature, going, okay, beautiful pattern here. How do we describe that mathematically and visually? How do we get it into, how do we test our proportions and how big is it going to be? Getting it into a 3D modeling program so we can test our mechanisms and our proportions there, mapping out the lights and the LEDs, prototyping our neck, basically going, will a slinky work? Why should we develop something more complicated if a slinky will work? And then, coming up with a test for how these lights are going to go into the fabric, and then ending up with a finished project. Thank you so much. Let's make way for the Google guys. They're up next, and thank you.